lot of times when I'm working on small pieces where I need really delicate dados or grooves, or especially stopped elements like this center section, which essentially is a mortise. I've also got these little dados, stopped dados on either end. Using saws and chopping it out like I normally would can sometimes be a little too aggressive for a piece of wood that's only 3/8 of an inch thick. So I have to be a little bit more delicate. And I find that the best way to do that is just go back to just using chisels and dropping all the router planes and all that such. And also using a drill bit to help you get through some of the material. Now, because I've got such a thin piece, again, it's only 3/8 of an inch thick, I can't use my center bits or my auger bits because the lead screw will poke through the other side. So I am going to grab a Forstner bit here, and I am putting it in a brace. And I'm just going to use this to remove kind of the bulk of the waste. And if you position the points of this carefully, you can hopefully get it to remove the material without wanting to walk on you. My bit is wanting to walk on me a little bit here. So that's probably as close as I can get with the Forstner bit, but at least it gets me somewhat of the way there. And then I just want to come back and treat it like a mortise, just using a chisel. I like to work in the direction of the bevel. And I could use a wider chisel here to cover the full distance, but I do find that, the wider the chisel, the more steel I have to drive into the wood, the more effort it's going to require, and the more possibility that I could damage this thin little piece of wood. So I'm using a 1-inch chisel right now. I could probably go even narrower. As you can see, I'm slightly overlapping the center line here. So I could actually make my job even a little easier by going to a narrower chisel and not having to drive quite so much steel in at once. Looks like my bit walked a little bit on me and went a little outside of my lines. Fortunately, this is actually a chisel rack that I'm building. Fortunately, that part that it walked on is on the bottom of the joint, so it will be invisible, but got a little careless, and that bit walked. See, and here's an instance where I probably got it too aggressive by going with a 1 1/4 inch Forstner bit, and I should have gone with something smaller. I am going to go to a large chisel here so I can use the width to ensure a straight edge, because I'm right in my knife line here. You can see this process is no different than chopping out a regular mortise, but it's kind of an unusual shape. And because we're dealing with such a thin piece here, you really run the risk of damaging the wood if you try to take out too much at once. I'll step down and sight down the chisel to make sure that I'm vertical. Just really light taps. There's no reason to wail on this. In fact, the harder you have to hit it, the more the chisel's fighting you, the more that wedging action is doing its job, and the greater the chance that you're actually going to split the piece, especially on that cut that I just made, where I'm working parallel to the grain, and I can very easily split the whole piece apart if I try to drive in too deeply. A lot of times when I'm working on shallow mortises like this, you can level it out with a router plane, but a router plane this big, it really is impractical because you can't, the blade is too wide to get into the whole thing. You could use one of those smaller router planes, but I find that it's just as easy to grab a chisel and come in here, bevel down, really choking up on the chisel. By resting the meat of my palm on the wood, I can essentially set that angle. I also can make slicing cuts when the wood isn't behaving. But again, keeping your palm anchored on the wood will really help you maintain that bevel angle. Of course, it probably goes without saying that a sharp chisel is absolutely necessary. And then for a depth stop, take your little combination square and set it to the depth that you're looking for. And if you press firmly down on the handle, you can glide it across and you can see where the high spots are. I've got a little high spot right in here. You can come back and just keep double checking. And essentially using the chisel bevel down like this, I mean, this is hand plane. This is all a hand plane is the chisel held at a fixed angle. And you can make a lot of cases for saying this is essentially what a router plane is. If you look at a router plane, I've essentially got a bevel here and a flat bottom. Well, I'm using this as the flat bottom, and the back, or the flat back of the chisel, is now my bevel. And just keep coming back and checking with your combo square depth gauge. Just make sure you've got good pressure down on the back here so that it doesn't dip in. And I'm going to even 3/16 inch depth now, so I can come in with my mating piece. And I've got a perfect fit.